And now it's time for our first speaker of the night.
Gray Braham. Gray is 24 and British. They are studying game audio in Tokyo and work for game studios Lemon and Blood and Road Gone, among other random commissions. They like old audio tech and rusty things. And of course, you already know them because they're one of our volunteers here at Nerd Nite every month. So please welcome Gray to the stage.
Hi! Thanks for coming to my fun little lecture about game music, the history of game music, the technology of game music, and the history of the technology of game music. Yeah, it's gonna go. So I decided to start with Pong, because I assume everyone knows what Pong is. It's like one of the, it's often said to be the first game ever, basically. Let's take a listen to how that audio sounds. Oh. It's coming through sick. So as you can see, it's not exactly a symphony. What you're hearing right here is just a little square wave going up and down an octave. And how they're doing that, because Pong, the arcade machine, isn't using any coding or really software per se, it's just like circuitry to like logic gates dictating what happens. The music is the same. It's basically sending a pulse to the speaker, going between 5 and 0 volts, rapidly back and forth in an even space. And as you can see, this is creating a square wave. It's oscillating. And if that word sounds familiar, it's because that's where we get the word oscillator from, for synthesizers. It's basically an analog synthesizer. And at the time, most game consoles were also analog synths. The home console ZX Spectrum, instead of a speaker, it uses something called a piezoelectric buzzer. My Greek isn't great, so I'm not sure piezo, whatever. But basically, it's a little ceramic disc that, like, when you power it with a voltage, it gets bigger and smaller depending on whether it has the voltage. And that, like, rapid oscillation between growing and shrinking makes a buzz, which creates a pitch. Let's listen up. Mind-blowing stuff. But maybe you noticed the title screen is playing a song, kind of. It's like a little melody, a little motif. The hardware at the time wasn't so great, so they couldn't really update screen graphics and play complicated audio at the same time, which meant you'd usually get like kind of a title theme when they showed the title, or like the flash screen, and then when you start playing, it just goes back to little beep boop sound effects. So moving on, they take that idea of square wave and just expand it outwards. So yeah, in the, I guess like late 80s to 90s, we got like the regular Nintendo and the Game Boy. Here, the biggest change is that we go from having one channel of the square wave to 4 channels. You get 2 square waves, and you can like kind of change the size of the square, make it a rectangle to change the sound a little bit. You also get a noise channel. So the Game Boy has a white noise channel inside, and they can change the size and pitch of the white noise to make it kind of sound like drums. And finally, we get the wave channel, but I'll show you the song first. This is from the NES, which is pretty similar architecture. Okay, that's crazy. That's like a pop song. There was like drums and bass and a melody and like kind of like an arpeggio chord thing going on there. So already, just by expanding the channels from 1 to 4, we can create a lot more complicated music. So this wave channel, basically with this thing, we get to draw our own waveform. Not just a square, but a sine wave, a triangle, or a sawtooth wave. And you'll have different slight combos. This is what it looks like if you were to draw a sine wave inside the Game Boy. Basically, it's altering the voltage to match the wave here, like upping and lowering the voltage here. It's called a wave table because it's not just one frame of this wave. I think on the Game Boy you get 32 of them, and you can sort of animate between all of them, which means you can have a sound that evolves over time, leading to basically anything. You can kind of create anything you want in there. Most modern like dubstep and EDM is using wavetable synthesis. It's the same technology. What this does mean is if, for example, I was to speak right now and look at my voice on an oscilloscope, see like the wave of my voice, and then recreate that wave and redraw it in this wavetable every time, I could kind of make it sound like my own voice. And yeah, the Game Boy has that technology. It's actually a lot easier than that. You can basically just turn a sample, downsample it like this, and turn it into a wave through the Game Boy, so like this. So it's a little rough around the edges, sure. But I mean, you can hear a voice there. Like, that's crazy to me. So moving on from here. Okay. In Europe, we called it a Mega Drive. I think it's the Genesis. Right, I don't know. In Japan, is it?
It's a Mega Drive.
Mega Drive. Okay, good. I'm right. But anyway, here they take a completely different approach. Instead, they're using something called FM synthesis to generate no audio. The biggest difference is there's 10 channels that can be played at the same time now, so they can have almost like kind of like chamber music going into an orchestra kind of thing if they wanted to. But FM synthesis, essentially you take any waveform, you take another waveform, and you modulate that first waveform with the second one. So as you can see here, we have two sine waves at different frequencies. And the second one, when this one gets lower, this upper waveform, the frequency decreases as well. When it gets higher, this one increases like here. On the Genesis, we have 6 channels to use this kind of technology, and each one of them has like 4 layers of modulators you can use at once. So what I'm trying to say is you can create basically anything, but it's really difficult to use because it's really hard to tell how the wave is going to change over time. But yeah, you can do crazy stuff with this. Awesome. Smooth. Thanks. So here, yeah, like kind of just sounds like a jazz record to me already. It's entirely synthesized. There's like no samples here, but still, you use some crazy good stuff with FM synthesis. I think Skrillex, like the dubstep guy, was using FM for like most of his early records. And of course, Sega's famous for Sonic. Just like a 90s pop song. Like that's like New Jack Swing, that's crazy. There was like a record scratch in there and like if the drums, they didn't feel synthesized, I think there were samples. So yeah, the Mega Drive as well, these 6 FM channels, you could also just play samples through them too, similar to the NES. Which meant, yeah, that's like a full pop song arrangement there. Could fool me. At the same time, PCs, home PCs, which have a lot more power, were doing different stuff with their music. In Japan, we had stuff like PC98. I think everyone in the West was using IBM or something similar. I wasn't alive, so I'm not really sure. Here, the biggest difference is there's 16 audio channels. And if you thought like 10 was a big number, like 16 is like bigger, trust me. You can do a lot more stuff with 16. I'm taking the example of PC98 here, but it's the same for most of them. Like on board, they only had FM synthesis. So the game developer would like put a sequence in their game, and the computer would read that and generate audio and play that song. However, PCs are good because they're modular. You can add stuff to them. So things like this MIDI module called a Rompler were invented. You could plug into your computer, and instead of generating audio, it would play samples. It would take like 1 to 2 second samples of a guitar, piano, whatever, and then pitch them around to match the sequence being given to them. And we can compare how these 2 different approaches sound. It's pretty. It is really pretty. It's also definitely chiptune. You can like see there's like a square wave coming across here. Like, it sounds a little bit outdated. If you were to plug in a MIDI module, it's pretty quiet. That's pretty quiet. It almost sounded like a full orchestra left the room over. It was really good. Like the difference is night and day between FM and using samples. So obviously, MIDI samples went out, and from then on, game consoles also switched over to using sequence MIDI like this. So the Super Nintendo. You may remember, Super Nintendo uses a cartridge. There's not a lot of space on that thing. The good thing about the PC was that the MIDI module was a separate add-on. All of the samples were stored inside of it. However, for a Super Nintendo game, you've got to fit the entire game, graphics, the audio, and like the samples used for the audio in the same cartridge. So they had to compress them. Not as much as for the Game Boy. I think that's like 4-bit audio. This is a rough approximation of what SNES audio would have been turned into. But what this meant was, once we figured out that the SNES was using these Wampler sample libraries, we could look back and try to find out where these composers took their samples from. So there's like an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets or spreadsheet online where people are trying to upload, okay, so this is Link to the Past. They used for their piano sample some Akai S1000 Wampler sample. We can go back and sort of recreate that song using the original samples before they were big version down sampled. I don't know if Nintendo like asked Akai if they could use these samples. The whole thing's a great area. It gets messier as we go on, so big secret. Let's compare though. Okay, it's classic. It's good. However. Yeah, so you can see it was the same instrument playing the same notes, but for some reason this one sounded a lot clearer. I'm not saying it's better, I actually like the sound a lot. But if you were to take that original sequence, take the original samples, and run it through a PC instead of a Super Nintendo, it would sound like that. The biggest thing that you can sort of tell the difference with is that, for example, shorter samples like a violin, if it's playing a longer chord on the Super Nintendo, you have to like stretch it out. And so they start looping it to try and make it last longer. And you can really tell this is happening when you listen to it. Oh crap, I missed one. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, you may be wondering like, you know, these SNES games are using like 1 to 2 second samples. What's the longest sample you can fit? What if you took like a 10-second sample or something? Well, Earthbound is a kind of quirky, weird RPG that's trying to take on pop culture elements and put them into a game. So it starts sampling stuff like Beatles or Prince, to just put them wholesale into their game. Yeah, they literally took a John Lennon sample, pitched it down sampled it, and just played it wholesale as if they made it. I don't know how legal that was. I'm sure it's a nightmare to localize that, but they did it. And that approach became more and more popular as time went on, because I mean, I guess it's easier. It sounds cool. So yeah, moving on to the next generation, you have CDs now. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but you can like listen to music on them. The problem being, of course, you have to fit a game, graphics, music, blah, 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 all on it again. So we have space for like 1 or 2 just like songs, like an MP3. It's called PCM or like streamed audio. The rest would still be sequenced, but they'd use higher quality samples because they still have more space. Instead of taking samples from a Wampler though, a growing trend in the time were these like sample CDs, which like 90s club D&D producers were using. They basically buy one. It would come with a bunch of like drum loops and choir samples on it. And you just drag and drop it and make a track basically. They bought these hopefully and used these in their games. And again, people are going back trying to find out, so this song is Zelda, where did this originate from? Where's this choir sample from? And it's kind of egregious. So that guy had an easy job, right? Like, I don't even want to say that sample pack name. If you just drag and drop that in, I think he had like some reverb, just went home for the day. Like, that was it for him. But then, of course, you can also just play MP3 songs in our game. So,
Did you ever know that I had money?
higher budget games like the Final Fantasy series, you're trying to show off by, I mean, that's Fei Wong, like the singer Fei Wong from like that Dreams cover from movie. Anyway, she's big in Hong Kong, trust. Anyway, yeah, they like paid her to sing a song for this game, promoted that with that song, and it was kind of like a big event piece for the game. And that would become the trend going forward. So for like PS2 onwards, even to now, we're still basically just using streamed audio because our storage sizes have increased. But there's more of a trend towards getting full orchestrations and getting full singers or licensed music. It was like a big event in 2012 when Skyward Sword came out, and they like only used a live orchestra for the whole soundtrack. And I mean, I'm sorry guys, it's kind of it for music. Like the technology is there, we did it. We have MP3 file. What is a little interesting is that independent games, indie games, a lot of them are made with like a retro aesthetic or retro feel in mind. So they're going back to these sort of SNES and 64 kind of sounds and trying to recreate them. But this time they don't have hardware limitations, which is what made that music so special. They have like budget limitations. They can't hire an orchestra, so I guess they kind of have to do that. The difference being, they're making it on a computer and then printing that out as a WAV or a MP3 file, just playing that in their game wholesale. The game is not generating audio or like taking a sequence and playing it, it's just playing an MP3. What this means is we can layer like drum loops, as well as maybe you could sing, you could play a guitar, you can do whatever you want basically. Take a listen. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that was like samples, drums, and then probably something that you acquire. What's interesting about this, these guys didn't go back to like the rompers where these samples came from and used those samples to make their music. They like ripped the samples from the SNES games, which were already like bit crushed and maybe stolen. Then like ripped those out. They called it a sample, but they ripped them out. And then sequenced their own music from that. Which meant this poor piano wave file is being stretched left, right, center, long, short, all over the place. Yeah, that was my lecture. So, questions? Maybe an answer.
All right, so now it's time for the Q&A. We'll start with anyone who has any questions. We have about 20 minutes. And after you're done asking a question, you can pass it along to the next person in the crowd. Who has questions?
Hello, my love. Also from England, so there you go. Is this tomorrow's your birthday? So, is that right?
No, girl. This is the new one.
Oh, sorry. I really like the presentation. And one of my friends works for Kojima Productions doing Death Stranding. And what's so interesting is now it's like a full-blown orchestra.
Yeah.
You know, there's very famous people that are doing the music. And it's just interesting how it's evolved. But at the same time, people really like the retro feel. So it's funny how it's come full circle, but I really liked your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I love the Kojima production music.
Yeah, fabulous, right?
So I have a question. I work for the gaming industry, mobile games mostly. One of the things I noticed that a lot of the production in games is very kind of like limited to the historical context, and there's very little new things going on. What do you think is going on that is new in music production for games?
In music production for games, they are hiring EDM producers for games now. They're hiring pop stars for games now. It's a lot more spectacle involved. As for the hardware, there's more of a push towards layering, right? Like having dynamic music, so like if you walk into a new area, some parts get quieter, some parts come out, or even like interactive parts of music, like if you walk on a space, like certain notes get played.
Like one of the biggest challenges we had was how to incorporate sound effects into the background music, because it has to fit, right? Like it was such a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So advice?
Yeah. Like an advice, you know, general thought on what can someone, like what do people do, you know?
For me at least, like I take the sound effects, whatever instrument I'm using for song, the sound effects, I take that from the song being used at that time in the game, and then write a new melody, and then play that louder than the rest of the music. So it's in the same sonic palette, but still stands out. That's all I got.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm an orchestrator, mostly for American musical theater, and we have very strict rules about, union rules about the number of live musicians that need to be associated with the production, depending on the venue. And I see a lot in the commercial, like television, film, music world, where there's less of an artistic approach to music and more of a functional approach to music sometimes. It gets clogged with artificial intelligence, not just used in the technology, in the DAW, but actually creating the content. And I really know nothing about the video game music industry, and I'm curious, do you have colleagues who encounter that in mass market video games, where maybe they're just trying to push something to a release and not focus on the artistic aspect of it? I'm just curious, or maybe in the mobile gaming world, if you run into that.
I mainly work with indie games. I'm still a student, actually. But from what I know, a lot of games are out there sort of doing a request per client basis. So they just sort of, almost like a competition. They're like, you need music like this, please submit to fit our criteria. And then we choose from that. And then people would submit and then hope to get selected.
Well, that's cool. I really like your presentation, so thank you so much.
Cheers.
Hi. So in your presentation, you mostly talked about the kind of synthesis of the sounds. But the point earlier about dynamic music, kind of think about what about the actual generation of the score and how that comes into the game. Is there anything interesting to say about that?
On the composition side?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of these consoles have very limited polyphony, so how many notes they can play at the same time, right? So, for example, like Pokemon music on the Game Boy, they can only have essentially 3 notes, so harmony is almost impossible. So they're writing like counterpoint, basically, to make it fit on the hardware. They have to like imply harmony by, like arpeggios, for example, like that. Nowadays, not so much, because we have more this.
Thanks.
I have 2 questions. The first one, kind of simple one. I'm curious because you talked a lot about the origins, a lot of these samples and such. If you heard about the theory that the music for Sonic 3 was actually written by Michael Jackson.
Not only is that true, but like Michael Jackson featured in Space Channel 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Dreamcast, and Home Alone samples were used in Nights in Your Dreams on the title screen. And Home Alone, the main character is played by Macaulay Culkin, who was like best friends with Michael Jackson. So my theory is that Michael like asked Macaulay Culkin, hey, can we use samples? And how did Home Alone samples end up in this game? It's a completely separate thing. But yeah, that is true. They confirmed it recently.
Interesting, cool. Yeah, I had no idea about a lot of what you were talking about. No. I mean, in the presentation, I had no idea about the origin of so many of these samples that you were talking about. Second question. What makes studying video game composition or video game music different from a traditional conservatory path or something like that?
It's more like studying for media, like film composition and game composition, is entirely separate because they kind of serve a purpose, right? It's more like program music. There's like a reason for it to exist, to think so much more about this context. Whereas with other types of music, there's I mean, not to say it's like more artistically expressive, but like you're kind of starting from nothing, right?
Megan, do you feel like something's been lost though? Because for example, when you're in Mario Brothers and you go down the tunnel, or a Koopa Trooper would spit fireballs at you, how can I explain it? There was almost like a visceral reaction.
Right.
You really, really noticed it. So do you feel like there's something that's been lost by kind of an oversaturation of music compared to the simplicity of how it was before?
I totally feel this romance, because like the constant singing to me, like it's generating audio for me, thank you. But like, yeah, I think what that more says is that as humans, we're easier at parsing simpler sounds than more complicated sounds. And so with a full orchestra, there's so much more going on, so much more reverb and effects going on. But yeah, I think it is easier to get lost in. I'm not gonna say one is better than the other, because art is art. I just think we should have both. Yeah.
Okay, okay, Melvin, I'm going to go before you. So because I got two.
Sure.
I got two questions, which is against the rules, but hey, it's my event. So, number one, there was this thing in the late '80s. I think it was. I want to say it was called Real Sound, but I know that was like a streaming format that happened later. But it was something really similar to that, and what they did is they found a way of making the PC speaker grind out something that sounded like it was multi-voice. It sounded like trash.
Yeah. Tim Follen.
Was that?
A guy called Tim Follen was the guy to figure that out,
Yeah, it was.
I don't know how that works, sorry.
It was awful. And also, you didn't sort of touch on how expensive even the FM synthesis cards were when they first came out. But okay, yeah. So that was the question I wanted to ask. Do you know what that was called? But you know the guy, but you.
I know the name of the technique. Yeah.
I've been trying to.
It's Tim Follen. You got it.
Okay. And then the other thing is, are you going to plug your game? Could you plug your game?
You should.
Put up there. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I work with my boyfriend, and we have a little game company in Switzerland called Lineage Blood. Last year we released a game called Tomorrow's My Birthday. It's sick. We tried out. We just released a demo for a game I wrote. Because normally they're the writer, but I decided to write this one called Soul Station. The demo came out like last week and a half maybe. And if you use your phone, you can scan the QR and wish this down Steam. I also put together Arena. It's like this website where it's like web weaving. You put like links to different sites. If you're looking for more resources to learn more about older game music, I put together a little thingy here you can scan. Yeah.
Melvin's got a question. So I got a question. So kind of moving back to that question about like how simple the sessions. Like some of the older sounds were simpler, so they were kind of easier to parse. So there's kind of like a romance in that, like you mentioned. But in the same way, like some people would say that vinyl is superior to like MP3s or whatnot. Like you mentioned how like some indie studios are using like intentionally like backported audio. So like, is there some like particularly romantic reason, for example, for using like the old samples, as compared to using new samples that sound close enough?
Now our company's making like similar sounding sample libraries that sound like this is, and like I said, like you can like hear the looping of the violin, for example. They have like within the did I say DST software? Sorry, yeah, like software that helps you recreate that sound. They're like they let you set your own loop points and do stuff like this to downsample it. There definitely is a market for that. There's also a market for us getting things for free. So
I have another question, kind of about what you're doing right now. You said you were a student and you're studying video game music composition. Is that? I would wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what that's like. There are a lot of people in the U.S. who study film composition, and I think Berkeley might have a program for video game music composition, but it's not a super common thing. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what goes into that.
Like in my school?
Yeah.
Yeah, not gonna lie. I kind of skipped a lot of classes and teach myself. Curriculum. They work with the industry, they match people up with like jobs quite easily, but I'm not crazy into it, so a lot of it is self-study. Sorry.
No, it's cool. Awesome. Keep skipping class.
Thank you for your presentation. I like to focus on the technical aspect of video game music. I'm just wondering, where do video game composers get their inspiration from? Because I've noticed that, let's say in Japan, JRPGs are pretty big. They seem to be influenced by classical music. Let's say Dragon Quest is a lot of classical music, whereas Final Fantasy composer Uematsu Matsunobu says that he got a lot of inspiration from progressive rock. So I'm just wondering, how do you see that, where do you think most video game composers are getting their influence from, and what kind of a style are they trying to replicate?
Oh, it depends on the composer, it depends on the time period. When I say video game music, you're probably hearing Mario in your head, and a lot of that is just like bossa nova, which is like Latin music that they're writing with a chiptune sound so it sounds new, but it's just bossa nova. I think I played like Sonic before, was basically just a New Jack Swing song. So, I mean, you can debate the ethics of it, but they are cribbing other people's, other cultures' music and playing that through game music. I think it is just per person what they're into. I know jazz bars were really popular in the 80s. All those composers were probably just into jazz and modern music like that. With indie games now, they're inspired by people that were inspired by like bossa nova. So we're getting really weird music now that's coming from 2 layers of inspiration. Yeah. I think for classical music, yeah, you can hear a lot of that in like your Western Pokemon for sure. Yeah.
Thanks. And is that Zelda on your sweater?
Yeah. But like this is orange. I like orange a lot, so I'm trying to set up.
Very fitting. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting to me when you talk about the origin of the video games music. Because my major back in uni was the communication engineering, so I basically studied the signal analyzing all the time, and I am also part of orchestras for many years, but I didn't connect the two before. So it's really interesting that the video games music are really close to the signals. My question is that do video game musicians nowadays play with the signals directly? Are there many applications about that?
I mean, most modern hardware isn't really generating audio in the same way, right? We're just playing basically wave files or whatever. I think there's some niche consoles out there. I've heard about the analog, or this is more like a crank that you turn. I think they might be generating audio. I imagine they are. Things like Tamagotchi are still using a piezoelectric buzzer. That's the same concept as Pong. So any small device that's beeping at you, we're still doing that. Yeah. I would say on the wide scale, probably not, unfortunately. It would be cool.
So where you study signals in your major,
as
it's just interesting hobbies.
I'm just interested in it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
This is kind of a follow-up to the previous question. So in the 80s and the 90s, a lot of the video game musicians were working against how bad their hardware was. And I think you were very kind in your talk to the crappy synthesizers of that period.
It's not fair. I love them for real.
But nowadays we have really good hardware and not so much limitations. So is this kind of technical aspect of video game music, we're trying to get something good out of limited resources, still a factor, or is it purely compositional problem then?
If it is, it's self-imposed, for sure. And that's a shame, because I really do think limitation creates creativity, right? A lot of the music you hear on that is made like that. Not Pokemon, right, for example. It's like that because of limitations. I think there are limitations there, time and salary. That's it.
I actually had a really similar question around what are your personal thoughts around limiting yourself in your composition? Do you feel like you impose these kind of limitations on yourself as far as using older hardware, or do you use are there ways that you kind of limit yourself to breed that creativity you were talking about?
Yeah, recently I'm trying to make music entirely without a computer just to see how it feels, and it's caveman times. I'm using a cassette. It's rough, and I'm trying to find ways to wire things weirdly, the Sega Saturn has an inbuilt there's a CD player in there, and you can pitch shift things. There's a reverb effects slider you can do. So I'm trying to instead of using reverb software, find hardware ways to do stuff like that. But I mean, it's for fun. I don't need to do all this.
Yeah, but that's the fun part. Yeah, for sure.
Right. It's playing with toys.
Yeah,
I always think that music is playing with toys.
Thank you very much.
Hey, so I'm a big fan of rhythm games, which have kind of a different relationship with music. They care very much about the timing synced with the video. They want recognizable songs if possible, and they're often on arcade machines, which might have their own technology for producing the audio. Do you know if they evolved on the same path or differed in any way?
I know absolutely nothing about that, sorry. I'm aware the word for that is a track maker as opposed to a composer. Yeah. My friend does it for some phone game, I don't know. I can put you into contact if you want to find out. I'm sorry.
Obviously, a lot of the really popular, soundtracks these days are the ones that have these really huge budgets. But are there any soundtracks you feel like are lesser known that you think any video game music fan should definitely listen to?
Everyone tap into Evergrace for PS2. It's so crazy. The guy who made that, Hoshino, basically did the same thing as the SNES guys and took like samples of guitars or whatever, and he sort of intentionally bent them to sound weird. They sound almost like a weird violin or something. There's weird layers going on. When you listen to a song, for the first 20 seconds, your brain is like trying to figure out what even is this. It's just like noise. And then after listening to it, you get more into it, you start to parse it. It's great, seriously. Evergrace.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. You sort of focused on sort of console eras, but there are sort of parallel technologies like mobile phone games and stuff, like your Snake on the Nokia and whatever. And obviously that's loaded with different hardware limitations and capabilities and stuff. So obviously as we move from dumb phones to smartphones and sort of I guess sound chips and stuff have gotten really just really good. I suppose there's like a flattening of the available technology, but are there sort of like interesting streams that you wish could have made it in like a different direction? Like for example, Tetris was like from Soviet console, right? And so that could have taken a different direction, and yet we kind of arrived at the same place anyway.
I mean, I wish everything was different, don't we all? Like, I just wish nothing had to end, right? I just wish everything could keep evolving. I'm really into the like mixed media feel of N64 type soundtracks where they're putting sampled layers as well as MIDI on top and like syncing them. I think that's interesting. We should do that more. And I think, I mean, even Pong is interesting, right? Like that's just like voltage being sent to a speaker, making a popping noise. Like more of that, please.
Okay. I think this is our last question, so please give one more round of applause for that.